Hello there. In this lesson, we will finish working with the past continuous tense, at least for now. We will also focus upon more sentences containing two different tense clauses. And then we will learn verbs which don't normally occur in the present or the past continuous tenses. First, two sentences with two clauses. We began studying these types of sentences in the last lesson. Look at the two sentences in the graphic. Both sentences contain the same clauses. The boys were waiting in line when the flight departed. When the flight departed, the boys were waiting in line. Both sentences are correct. Each contains a past continuous verb form, were waiting, and each contains a past verb form, departed. Only the sequence of the clauses is different in each sentence. Sequence means order. Now, look at the third sentence. The boys, when the flight departed, were waiting in line. The difference here is that one clause is placed inside another clause. In fact, the main clause, or the main action of the sentence, is interrupted by the when clause. Listen to my voice when I say it again. The boys, when the flight departed, were waiting in line. For right now, we don't care, in this case, care means worry about, we don't care or worry about it because all of these sentences mean essentially the same thing. Each sentence emphasizes something a little differently. Emphasize means make important, right? Notice that the first sentence has no punctuation between clauses. Punctuation means grammar marks, commas, etc. That's because the first sentence has its clauses in normal order. No punctuation. Main clause followed by time clause. Time clauses are adverbial clauses, right? They modify verbs. In the second sentence, the main clause occurs out of order. It's last. The comma or punctuation indicates this change in order. When the flight departed, the boys were waiting in line. Okay? And the third sentence is the most abnormal of all because, as I said, the adverb clause is put right in between the sentence. The main clause is separated by that adverbial clause, and two commas, one on each side, indicate the separation. One thing to remember, when you separate a main clause, you must separate it here, between the subject and the verb. Okay, now let's practice these verb tense combinations, past continuous tense with simple past tense. And let's also practice these three different subordinate clause positions. Subordinate means less important, right? So initial means first, final means last, and medial means in between, middle, right? Okay, listen. Initial. When the flight departed, the boys were waiting in line. The adverb clause is in the initial position. And the second one, medial, right? The boys, when the flight departed, were waiting in line, right in the middle. And then the final, the boys were waiting in line when the flight departed. Okay, in this practice, I will say the past tense clause with when, and you will put it into a complete sentence with a past continuous tense clause. Okay, sounds a little tricky, but it's not bad. Look at this graphic. The boys were waiting in line. The men were checking their bags. Yukiko was using her debit card at the ATM. Raul was having a drink at the bar. Maya was reading a book. Hideo was surfing the World Wide Web, or the web. Okay? Now, I'll say, when the flight departed, and the boys, and you make the sentence. When the flight departed, the boys were waiting in line, or were using their credit card. You get the picture. And here's the second variety. You put the adverb clause at the end. So that becomes, the boys were waiting in line when the flight departed. Right? And last variety, right in the middle. The boys, when the flight departed, were waiting in line. A little tricky, but kind of fun. Let's try another one. When the police arrived, the men. First one. When the police arrived, the men were checking their bags. Were having a drink at the bar. Okay? Now let's put it reverse. The men were checking their bags when the police arrived. And let's put it in the middle. The men, when the police arrived, were checking their bags. Okay? Let's try them now. Here we go again. When the flight departed, the boys. When the flight departed, the boys were waiting in line. Perfect. And now? The boys were waiting in line when the flight departed. In the middle? Yeah, the boys, when the flight departed, were waiting in line. Great. Another one? When the police arrived, the men. Yes. When the police arrived, the men were checking their bags. Great. Now reverse them. Precisely. The men were checking their bags when the police arrived. In the middle? Yes, the men, when the police arrived, were checking their bags. That's great. One more. When the alarm went off, Yukiko. When the alarm went off, Yukiko was using her debit card, checking her bags. Okay? And now reverse those. Yes, Yukiko was using her debit card when the alarm went off. And now in the middle? Yeah, Yukiko, when the alarm went off, was using her debit card. Great, and tough. Here's another one. When the bomb scare occurred, Raul. Easy. When the bomb scare occurred, Raul was having a drink at the bar. Reverse them. Perfect. Raul was having a drink at the bar when the bomb scare occurred. And in the middle. A little tough. Raul, when the bomb scare occurred, was having a drink at the bar. And finally, an easy one. When the airport closed, Maya. Okay, when the airport closed, Maya was having a drink at the bar. Or Maya was reading a book. Let's reverse those. Maya was reading a book when the airport closed. Beautiful. And now inside. Maya, when the airport closed, was reading a book. That is really good work. Look at this graphic, because here are some verbs that are not used in continuous tenses, present or past. You need to know them, and they're fairly simple and easy to categorize. The following verbs are not normally used in the continuous tenses. So you've got emotions, like hate, like, love, need, want. And then you have verbs of senses, like hear, see, smell, taste. And then you have verbs of, let's say, thoughts. So believe, know, think, understand. In many cases, the restrictions for these verbs are a matter of common use. It's hard to explain these restrictions. It's hard to explain common use, right? Sorry. But the restrictions exist. Okay. Let's try an exercise. And you'll have to discriminate between verbs that can use continuous tenses and the ones I just showed you. So in the exercise, you'll decide if the verb can be used in the past continuous tense, or if it must be restricted to past tense. And remember, the restricted verbs fall into these three categories: emotions, senses, or thoughts. In the exercise in your study guide, you will see sentences which need past tense verbs. Each sentence will have a blank for the correct verb form. The main verb will appear in parentheses. If the verb can be continuous past, write it in that form. If it cannot, simple past. Okay? Here's an example. You will see they blank taste the spaghetti. Taste, verb of sense, be careful, right? So you will write they tasted the spaghetti. No continuous tense with taste. Here's another example. You will see the bankers, blank, treat their clients quite nicely. And you will write, the bankers were treating their clients quite nicely. Okay? Remember, if you can use the verb naturally in the past continuous, then let's use it. Okay? So put your program on pause, look at the study guide, and continue the exercise. I'll see you when you finish. Let's review that exercise. You saw they, a blank, the verb taste, and the spaghetti. And you wrote the sentence, they tasted the spaghetti. Taste is a verb of sense. You can't make a past continuous out of that, or you shouldn't. Next one. The bankers were treating their clients quite nicely. Then Hideo was exchanging his yen when the police arrived. Next, Maria heard the alarm go off. Here is a verb of sense, so we use just past tense. Next, Maria and Yukiko hated the bomb scare at the airport. Verb of emotion, just a past tense. Next, two children were waiting to board their airplane, and the police were evacuating the airport, and they wanted to protect the passengers. Want is one of those emotional things, right? So, simple past. Next, the airport personnel were cleaning the waiting area. And finally, they needed to finish their work before morning. Need, also a desire, emotion, simple past. That's good.